So if any of you have a question about anything I've talked about so far, or anything that came up in your group, discussion group, you could ask now.
Probably a small... I think it's just a small technical question. You referred to the Vajra, and again I may have written it down wrong, as representing the union of method and wisdom in one consciousness. Is that right?
Yeah, that's in this term Vajrayana. But then elsewhere, for example, when using Vajra and bell, those are like the two implements used in
that was my question. So
yeah,
it's only in this context.
So there the Vajra is said to represent the method side, the bell represents wisdom. So, I mean, the same object can have different meanings or different symbolisms in different contexts. So I think this is the explanation of Vajrayana, why Vajrayana is a term used for Tantra.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Yeah.
But we just kind of had an interesting discussion on emptiness, and actually at the beginning we've been all kind of like, oh, how to even start about it, which from my side I think I don't understand it at all. If somebody would approach you, and somebody maybe like even who doesn't really know anything about emptiness and would like to ask you, could you explain me that in a very simple way? What does it mean? We all Buddhists, we talk so much about this emptiness.
Yeah. Emptiness in 25 words or less. Yeah. Well, I was thinking, Lama Yeshe, in fact, I'd like to recommend his book in case you haven't come across it. This is the old version, but there's a newer version with a different cover. I think it's sort of a dark blue background, and anyway, it's called Introduction to Tantra. And I really recommend it because Lama's style was not to go into all the nitty-gritty details and use all these technical terms and, but make it really simple and tasty, like you could actually get some taste and also a lot of inspiration. So I recommend that. And he does have an explanation. Yeah, there's the new version, dark blue cover. He does have an explanation in this book of these three principal aspects of the path, but again, in a very sort of down-to-earth way that we can relate to. And one of the things Lama would say with regard to emptiness, he would talk about, he used this expression, concrete view, referring to the way we see things. We tend to see things as like concrete, very solid and very permanent and very fixed, and they're really like that, just as they appear from their own side. For example, if there's somebody we don't like, somebody we find annoying or irritating or horrible or whatever, the way we view that person, the way we see that person is like they're really horrible and bad from their own side, in them of themselves, out there, totally cut off from me. They're really bad. And this isn't something we do deliberately or consciously. It's just the function of ignorance, how ignorance works, how it colors our view of things. And so when we see the person existing in that way, it's almost like, well, I have no choice but to hate them, and want to avoid them, and I'm going to be like that. They're going to be that way forever, and I'm going to always hate them. It's like unchangeable. Does that make sense? Okay. So, and then with the opposite, if there's somebody we like and we think that person is so wonderful, so fantastic, again, there's a sort of concreteness about it, like they're really fantastic from their own side, and I can't help but be in love with them or be attached to them or think they're great and wonderful, and it's going to be like this forever and ever and ever. So that's just and a kind of explanation of how ignorance affects our way of seeing things and causes us to see things in a unrealistic way, because nothing is like that. Nobody is completely horrible and bad from their own side 100% of the time, forever and ever and ever. I mean, for one thing, everything is subject to change and permanence. And also, nobody is 100% bad. Everybody has some good qualities. Yeah? So ignorance causes our mind to see things in this concrete way. And then when we see things that way, it sort of feeds or fuels our emotions, our aversion and hatred, or fear, or attachment, desire. And so, I mean, it's difficult to really understand emptiness. You have to study for years and meditate for years and so on and so on. But he said, even if we can like start to soften the concrete view of things, you know, so that it's not so hard and solid. And one way we can do that is to just question, am I seeing this correctly? Am I seeing that person correctly as they really are? Or am I exaggerating? And an easy way to do that is to just check how other people see that person. You know, the person that we hate, there's some people who think that person is wonderful and fantastic. And vice versa, the person we think is wonderful and fantastic, other people say, oh, what do you see in them? You know, like, for them, that person is just horrible and disgusting. So right there, that kind of checking makes us, whoa, you know, maybe I'm not seeing things as they really are. So that's kind of the start of getting an understanding of emptiness. I mean, the term emptiness is not easy to understand. We have to be very clear. It doesn't mean nothingness, which can, you know, it can sound like that. Emptiness means nothing exists. There's nothing there at all. I'm not here and you're not here and all this is not here. It doesn't mean that. What it means is things do exist, but they are empty of our ordinary, mistaken, exaggerated way of seeing them. They're empty of a certain mode of existence that our mind sort of projects onto them. That needs to be peeled away, cleared away, and then we can see things as they are. So that's one approach to understanding emptiness that might be helpful, and I can see you nodding your head, so I guess it's something. Lama was a great communicator. Really got to people's hearts and helped them get some taste of some of these normally really complex, difficult concepts. But anyway, and also another thing is we talk about two levels of truth or two levels of reality. So there's the relative or conventional level. That's the world we normally live in, the way things normally appear to us and so on, and function and operate. And there's good and bad and right and wrong, and this is the cause of that, and so on and so forth. So that's one level. Then there's the ultimate level, and that's where we find emptiness. Emptiness is the ultimate nature of things, the final nature, the real nature of everything in the relative world, the conventional world. And it must be understood that those two do not contradict each other. It's not that emptiness contradicts relative truth or relative contradicts ultimate truth. It's like they're both there side by side, or two sides of a hand or two sides of a coin. They actually depend on each other. They're interdependent. But that can be another helpful approach to understanding emptiness, that there are these two levels of things. There's the world we normally live in, you know, and then there's another level, a deeper level behind that that's normally hidden to us. And if we can understand that ultimate nature of things, the emptiness of things, that's the thing that clears up our confusion, our pain, our suffering, our problems. So, I mean, I'm still, myself, a long way from really understanding emptiness. It's a long process. But even a little bit of understanding that one can get is helpful, especially what I mentioned about the concrete view thing. You know, so even if we can just have a little bit of a softer way of looking at things rather than the hard, solid, concrete way that we normally do, it already relieves a lot of our stress and suffering and pain. Does that help? But I also recommend this book. And there is a whole chapter in here on emptiness that would probably help.
It's a question about how you would be guided in terms of which deity you should choose to do your practice with, apart from your teacher. So my question comes from the idea that if all Buddhas are one taste and that you get to the same place, how do you determine which is the best
for you
sadhana to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess, again, traditionally in the past, in India, probably in Tibet as well, you know, teachers and disciples had quite a close relationship with each other. So the teacher would get to know the disciple very well and would be training and guiding the disciple. And then, it would be up to I don't know that always, but often it's the teacher who would recommend a particular deity practice for the disciple based on their character or their personality. Or maybe if the teacher has clairvoyance, they could see past lives and this is the right deity. So I'm guessing, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that's how it would have happened in the past. Nowadays, things are quite different. Teachers, in many situations, they just fly in and they're there for a weekend or a week or something, and they're giving this, public initiation, and you don't have a chance. Most people wouldn't have a chance to have a personal interview with a teacher to find out, is this one for me? Should I do this one? So it still happens. Sometimes people can have a very close relationship with a particular teacher and ask advice of the teacher which deity is right for me, and then the teacher would tell them. So it does happen like that sometimes, but I'm not sure if that's the case for everybody. So that's one way, is to have a relationship with the teacher and then ask advice from your teacher. But it's possible in another way that some people may just feel a strong connection with a particular deity, As soon as they hear about this deity or see a picture, they just feel, that's the one that I want to do. That's the one that I want to practice. And then just on their own, intuitively they would know that is what they want to do. So, that's all I can say about that. Yeah. And what you say is true, that each deity is an embodiment of enlightened mind, enlightened qualities, and but they are said to specialize in certain qualities. For example, Manjushri is the Buddha of wisdom. So if you're a student, for example, trying to study, trying to develop your knowledge, your wisdom, and so on, then you would rely on Manjushri. Or Chenrezig is for compassion. I think in the Tibetan tradition, many people would practice many deities, not just one. But they say in the Indian tradition, in the past, the Indians would really focus on one deity and really practice that and then achieve. They say you can achieve all the qualities, all the realizations just with relation to one deity. So, that's as much as I can say about that. But anyone else? Well, if other questions come up later, you can ask. So we were looking at the 4 classes of Tantra and what is the difference between them. In the last column of that chart, It says etymology of names according to the main practices. Now, so this is another difference between them. Whether they emphasize more external activities as opposed to internal activities. So external activities would be, for example, cleanliness, making sure that your body is very, very clean and your environment is clean. So in Kriya Tantra, Action Tantra, the first of the four, external activities predominate. There's a lot of emphasis on external activities, cleanliness, the kind of food you eat. If you're practicing Action Tantra, Kriya Tantra, you're supposed to be vegetarian and avoid the so-called black foods like onion, garlic, eggs, and so on, because those are foods that are said to be, somewhat impure, and better to keep yourself free from those. And there's also, more emphasis on, physical movements, mudras, and so forth. So that's the emphasis in Kriya Tantra. And the second one, Performance Tantra. It says external activities and internal. So internal means more your, what's going on in your mind, meditative states, meditative activities. So in the second class of Tantra, there's still some emphasis on external, but it's also more on internal. So there's an equal emphasis on external and internal. Then with the third class, Yoga Tantra, there's still some emphasis on external, but more on internal. So the internal activities. Now, yoga, we have to be careful about this word yoga, because I think when we first hear yoga, we think of, physical asanas. But in fact, the term yoga, I'm trying to remember, Naljor in Tibetan, and it has the sense of joining. I forget now what is the... But it doesn't only refer to physical activities. It can also refer to internal activities, internal yogas. I think it's the same in Hindu yoga as well. There's many different kinds of yoga. Huh? To yoke, yeah, to join, to yoke, yeah. But I'm saying, there's different kinds of yoga, and some of them emphasize more. I think, is it Raja Yoga? Raja Yoga is like concentration, so it's not about physical postures. And then the fourth class, highest yoga, the etymology of the term is the yoga of which there's no higher. There's nothing higher than this. And in highest yoga tantra, the main emphasis is on internal activities. Not much on external. It's not to say there's nothing to do with the external, but that's regarded as less important, and it's mainly internal. And internal actions here in the highest yoga tantra mainly refers to activating the clear light mind. So you've probably heard of this. The clear light mind is the most subtle level of mind that we have. Something that's normally not part of our everyday awareness. It only really gets activated at certain moments, such as at the time of death. But in highest yoga tantra, in fact, only in highest yoga tantra is there mention of the clear light mind, this very subtle mind. The other classes of tantra don't recognize it, don't talk about it. So that's the main thing in highest yoga tantra, is activating this very subtle mind of clear light mind, and then using that in one's meditation to realize emptiness, bring together the clear light mind and the realization of emptiness, and that's the thing that really enables you to reach enlightenment quickly. So this is just a brief look at the 4 classes of Tantra, but then as we go through the text, it goes into each class individually and mentions their main features, main practices. So let's look at the next point, top of page 2, letter H. 3 types of initiation. Sorry. So an initiation is the entranceway, the gateway to Tantra. If you really want to practice Tantra fully, you have to receive an initiation. Now, I said fully because some teachers say it's okay to do certain practices without having an initiation. For example, here in Jamyang, you probably do practices like Medicine Buddha or Tara or even Lama Chupa practices. So these are actually tantric practices, but it's said to be okay for people to come and participate in these pujas, these meditations, recitations, even if you haven't had an initiation. But to practice certain things, for example, visualizing yourself as a deity, that kind of practice you cannot do if you haven't had an initiation. That's how it's explained. So if you want to fully engage in tantric practice, including deity yoga, you need to have an initiation. And so this explanation of the 3 types of initiation isn't always available, and it's really good to know because it said that the actual gateway to Tantra is the first type of an initiation called a great initiation. In Tibetan, it's Wangchen. And not every initiation is a great initiation. Only some are. And just to mention the second type of initiation, the translation is subsequent permission, or Jamyang in Tibetan. So I think in actuality, many, if not most, of the initiations that are given in Western Dharma centers are actually the second type, the Jamyang. They're usually shorter in length. They don't take as long, sometimes only an hour, very quick. Whereas the first type of initiation usually takes 2 days. The first day is a preparation. The second day is the actual initiation. And so it's a little tricky, because if you haven't received a great initiation and you attend a Jamyang, subsequent permission, you don't actually get it. You don't actually enter Tantra. But like I say, this isn't always explained. So, and maybe there are different explanations about it, but this is what I've heard from one of my teachers, who's a great scholar, and I think it's true. So if you really want to engage in tantric practice, you must first attend a great initiation, receive a great initiation. So then you're qualified to do tantric practice. And then after that, you can take the second type, the Jamyang, the subsequent permission. You can take many of those, and then you're fully qualified to engage in the practice. Now, how to know if the initiation is a great initiation or not? Like I said, one way of knowing is the time. It's usually, I say usually it takes 2 days, but not always, because sometimes the Lama will do it all in 1 day. He'll squish everything together in 1 day. But it's still quite long. It usually takes several hours, and you receive a piece of kusha grass, or 2 pieces of kusha grass you put under your mattress. You're supposed to watch your dreams. You get a red string to tie around your arm. So those are some of the things that happen in a great initiation. And the great initiation, now in Tibet, I think most of the practices they do are either Kriya Tantra, the first class, or Highest Yoga Tantra, the 4th one. There don't seem to be, I mean, they probably do exist, but not very common, not very popular. The 2 middle classes of Tantra, the performance and Yoga Tantra. I don't remember hearing of anybody giving those initiations or doing those practices. They probably do exist, but they're just not very common. So in the Tibetan tradition, most of the initiations that are given, most of the practices do belong to the 1st and the 4th classes of Tantra. And there are great initiations in both of those. So for example, Avalokiteshvara Chenrezig, the thousand arm Chenrezig, there is a great initiation of that. deity, and it belongs to Kriya Tantra. There's also a great initiation of Medicine Buddha, which is Kriya Tantra. There might be others as well that I just don't know about. Mitupa, maybe? Mitupa. So those are great initiations belonging to Kriya Tantra. And then highest Yoga Tantra, there's quite a few of those. For example, Kala Chakra, Haigriva, I think, Havajra, Yamantaka, Heruka. Those are some of the more common, Goya Samaja. Those are some of the more common great initiations belonging to the fourth class, highest Yoga Tantra. So just to be aware that not every initiation that's offered is a great initiation. And so if you haven't yet entered Tantra and you want to enter Tantra and take, be able to fully practice it, just to know that you have to first receive a great initiation. There's probably been some happening here in Jamyang, some great initiations. Yeah. Okay, Dagri Rinpoche will be giving one in July. Okay. And then the third type of initiation is called a long life initiation. And there's certain deities, White Tara, Amitayas, and Ushnisha Vijaya. Those are as far as I know, the three deities associated with long life. And a long life initiation you can attend, anybody can attend without taking any kind of, making any commitments. So they're often given just to give people a chance to do long life practices. So it's said that sometimes a person may have what are called life obstacles, meaning, there's some possibility of their life being short. I don't know exactly why, but and it said that by doing a long life practice, such as White Tara or these other two, you can clear away these life obstacles and ensure yourself of a longer life. So that's one reason for giving the long life initiation. So anyway, that's called a Tsewang. And those initiations are also usually relatively short. They're often given at the end of a teaching. For example, when the Dalai Lama gives a series of teachings, then at the end of that, probably because of being requested, he might give one of these long life initiations. So, again, an initiation is an entrance to Tantra, and it's said that certain requirements are needed. The person giving the initiation needs to have themselves receive the initiation, engaged in a retreat of that deity, having completed a certain number of mantras and other kinds of requirements, and only then are they qualified to give the initiation. So it can't be given just by anybody. And also, the person should have received teachings that are part of an unbroken lineage, going back all the way to the Buddha. So these are just things to check if you are thinking of taking an initiation. Just make sure that the teacher giving the initiation does have the right qualifications. And then for you, the person receiving the initiation, requirements are that you have taken refuge. However, in some cases, if you haven't yet taken refuge, refuge is given at the beginning of the initiation. Okay, so that can be your taking of refuge. So that's something to check up, though, and not just take for granted. But yeah, taking refuge is a basis for that. And then you should have received teachings on and thought about and meditated on these three principal aspects of the path mentioned before. So you have to have a good understanding of those in your mind. And then your motivation for taking the initiation needs to be altruistic motivation, bodhicitta, that you wish to reach enlightenment, to help all sentient beings. Because the practice of Tantra is for that purpose. It's a practice for the attainment of enlightenment. And then you need to have faith in Tantra. They say this is a really important factor, faith in Tantra, because Tantra is, it's an esoteric tradition. A lot of things can't really be explained logically. We try to understand, why does this deity look like that, and so on and so forth, and why are they that color, not some other color? Well, that kind of thing, you may not get an answer to. So you just have to have faith. You just have to take it on faith that, the Tantric teachings do originate from the Buddha, from enlightened mind. And this is a little bit tricky because the origins of Tantra are a little unclear. And there's some other Buddhist traditions who even don't accept Tantra as the Buddha's teachings. They don't exist in their traditions of Buddhism. And also Western scholars, many Western scholars would say, Tantra arose later, after the Buddha, not originated with the Buddha. But the story from within Tantra is that the Buddha did teach Tantra, but the way in which he taught it, he would manifest in the deity. He would, because a Buddha is able to manifest in any form he or she wants to. They're not limited to one kind of body, but they could appear in some other form. So this is what the Buddha did. The Buddha appeared as some deity like Vajradhara or Kala Chakra. So he manifested that form, and in that form, he taught, that particular Tantra. So this is how it's explained within the Tantric tradition. But, there are people who would doubt that kind of story, who would ask for proof. Where's the concrete proof? And it's probably hard to give that. So that's why faith is a very important factor, that we have to just trust that these practices are genuine, that they are beneficial, that they will lead to the results that we're trying to achieve. I remember having a discussion about this with somebody who's actually a long-term student of Tibetan Buddhism, and I was quite surprised that, they said that they didn't believe that Tantra was taught by the Buddha. And so I was quite shocked, and I said, well, if Buddha didn't teach it, then who did? Because it's amazing. I mean, the explanation, especially in highest yoga tantra, this whole explanation of the channels and the chakras and the very subtle mind of clear light and how you can, get that activated and do all these amazing things. I mean, if the Buddha didn't teach that, whoever taught it was amazing, And are you saying that the Buddha didn't know about these things? Yeah? I mean, if we say, well, it was taught by somebody else, did the Buddha not know about the subtle mind of clear light and the channels and the chakras and so on and so forth? For me, that would be incredible. That would be unbelievable. If we say the Buddha's enlightened, the Buddha's fully enlightened, fully omniscient, he must know everything. So if there's somebody else who knew about this stuff, but not the Buddha, it doesn't make sense. So that was my response, and I still feel that way. That the teachings on Tantra, the practices of Tantra, are really incredible, really amazing. And they have to come from a Buddha. They have to come from enlightened mind. That's my view, but I don't have any proof for that for somebody who has doubt. So just so that you know, it is a kind of point of controversy. So where was I? Yeah, so faith is a very important part of the practice. And then another point is when you do take a tantric initiation, then usually there are some commitments that are made. At the minimum are bodhisattva vows. So for example, in Kriya Tantra, whenever you take an initiation, you take bodhisattva vows. That's part of the initiation. So if you haven't done that already, if you don't already have the bodhisattva vows, you do take the bodhisattva vows. We don't have time to go into these here, but if you don't know about the bodhisattva vows and you are interested in tantric practice, then it's good to look those up. There's some materials on FPMT website, list of the bodhisattva vows. There's also books about the bodhisattva vows. So anyway, you have to be prepared to keep the bodhisattva vows. And then with the highest yoga tantra initiation, in addition to bodhisattva vows, there's also tantric vows. There's a whole set of vows related to tantra. So you're taking those as well. So it's quite a big commitment. And then on top of that, depending on the teacher or the Lama giving the initiation might ask you to do certain practices every day. Might. I say doesn't always happen, but it often happens. So it might be a certain number of mantras, or it might be a whole sadhana, a practice that might take anywhere from 10, 20, 2 hours, 10, a certain number of minutes to several hours. So you need to know about that before taking an initiation and be ready to take on those commitments and do them to the best of your ability for the rest of your life. Okay, that's... And then another thing is, during the initiation, you need to be awake and alert to the best of your ability and participate in the initiation, meaning the teacher will ask you to visualize this, do certain visualizations or generate certain thoughts, certain states of mind, and you need to follow that. You need to do that to the best of your ability, of course. So it's not just a question of sitting there and falling asleep or your mind wandering all over the place. You won't really get the initiation in that way. So initiation and receiving the initiation is a mental thing. It's something that happens in your mind. And it will only happen if your mind is really there, following it, alert, and participating. And also feeling, I am receiving the initiation. Okay? Because there might be certain circumstances where, for example, if you're a translator, for example, you're having to translate this initiation, but you don't really want to take it. So I think you could do that. You could be there and just translating, but not thinking, I am taking this initiation. So I'm just saying, it's not enough just to be present in the room when an initiation is given and even follow the words of the initiation. You have to really have the intention to take it and feel that you are taking it. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah. And something interesting, I just heard this recently. His Holiness, I heard this from Geshe Kelsang Walmo, German lady Geshe. So I think it's quite a reliable source. But His Holiness has said that if he's giving an initiation and it's being live streamed, you can receive the initiation that way. You can be tuned in, with your internet. And as long as you're sitting there, it has to be live streamed and not watched later, but it's live. He's sitting there giving the initiation. At the same time, you're sitting there watching it on your computer screen. And if you're doing it, you're following all the steps and so forth, and you can receive an initiation in that way. So that's good, because then, well, in the sense that if you can't, get on a plane and rush off to where he is and receive the initiation, you can stay in your own home and receive it. Okay. So why is an initiation the entrance to Tantra? It's because during an initiation, with the Lama's meditative abilities and so on and so forth, you have a chance for your Buddha nature, the pure nature of your mind, to be awakened. So that's why, it's such a powerful experience. And also, parts of the initiation are for purification of our body, our speech, and our mind. So clearing away, purifying obstacles, negativities in our body, speech, and mind. And then we are receiving permission to be able to engage in the practices related to that particular deity. So an initiation is always related to a specific deity. Okay, so when you receive an initiation, usually then you have some commitment to continue doing a practice related to that deity in order to just keep the continuity, the continuum of that connection with the deity. And, you know, the whole purpose of this is, again, to awaken our Buddha nature and make it manifest so that we become Buddha ourselves, we become enlightened ourselves. And then one more thing about initiation is that when you take an initiation, that teacher who's giving the initiation becomes one of your gurus, one of your teachers. You have no choice about that. With other things, you have a choice. For example, if just teachings are being given, you can attend the teachings, listen to the teachings, and you don't have to take that teacher as your guru, as you don't have to make this guru-disciple relationship with that teacher. You can decide then, anyway, it's up to you. It's up to your choice to take that teacher as a guru or not. But in some circumstances, for example, taking a tantric initiation or taking vows, if you're taking refuge or bodhisattva vows, also the person giving refuge or giving vows also becomes one of your teachers, one of your gurus. Also, what they call lungs, Tibetan word that means like transmission. If the teacher is reading a text, you know what that is, yeah. Because this transmission is considered very, very important. Although the Dalai Lama says we shouldn't cling to it too much because some transmissions have been lost; they're no longer existing. And he says, well, we shouldn't say, oh, well, we can't study that text because there's no more transmission of it. But anyway, the idea is, if you want to study a particular text, then it's helpful to get a transmission of that text from a teacher who himself has received a transmission of it. So like a few years ago, the Dalai Lama was giving the transmission of all the Lamrim texts. Some of you may have gone to those. He gave it over a number of years, and some in Sera, Ganda, and Drepung, these monasteries in South India. So he was reading, I think, how many, 11 or more of these Lamrim texts, just reading them, sometimes stopping and teaching, but just a lot of the time was just reading the text, and you're sitting there and listening and getting the transmission. So that's what's called lung. So in the case of a lung, if you're receiving a lung in this way, again, that teacher becomes one of your gurus, one of your spiritual masters. Does that make sense? So this is something else to consider. If you want to take an initiation, you have to decide, am I willing and able to take that person as one of my gurus? Because then you have to maintain guru-disciple relationship with that teacher. And speaking of which, one of the texts in your little packet here is called the 50 Verses of Guru Devotion. This is a text by Indian master Ashvagosha, and I think it was very, very old. I think in the first century BC. That's really old. Whoa! So that's more than 2,000 years. So this is a text that explains how you should behave with regard to teachers, gurus, especially what are called Vajra masters, meaning teachers from whom you've received initiation. So we don't have time to go through this, but I would suggest if you could read through it on your own, possibly tonight or Only 50 verses, not too long. And if you have questions, I'll do my best to answer. And there's also, on the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives, there are 2 commentaries to this. One is shorter, one is longer. And they're both given by Geshe Ngawandage, who was my first teacher, actually. Teacher at the Tibetan Library in Dharamsala a number of years ago. So he's explaining this text. So you can get those, download those if you want. There's also a little booklet. It was published by the Tibetan Library, a little booklet of this text with commentary by Geshe Ngawandage. So this is something you need to be prepared if you do want to engage in tantric practice. The teacher, the Lama that you're getting the initiation from, you need to practice Guru devotion with that teacher. And this text is the one that explains how to relate to your spiritual teacher, what to do, what not to do, and how to amend any mistakes that you make, and so on. Is that clear? A lot of work. You have to be very serious about practicing to get into Tantra. Okay, the next point, letter I, is the qualities of a Vajrayana master. Because this is also something we need to check. We need to make sure that the teacher we are taking as a Vajra master, Tantric master, does have the appropriate qualities. So first of all, it says first we should make sure that the master has the 10 qualities of a perfect Mahayana spiritual teacher. And these are explained in Maitreya's Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. So this is the same as in the Lamrim. So if you've studied the Lamrim, in the section on Guru devotion in the Lamrim, it explains these 10 qualities. So since Tantra is part of Mahayana, it's a branch of Mahayana, then a Tantric teacher needs to have these 10 qualities. So I won't go through them. You can read that on your own. You probably heard them before anyway. And it said that if the teacher, they say if it's hard to find a teacher who has all 10 of these qualities, then try to find a teacher who has the 5 most important ones. So I put a star next to the 5 most important ones. So it's the first 3, mind subdued through the practice of pure ethics. So a Vajrayana master needs to be very ethical, have good ethics, pure ethics. And number 2, mind pacified and undistracted through the practice of concentration. So the teacher should have a good command of concentration, be able to keep their mind focused. 3rd is a mind thoroughly pacified by discriminating wisdom, referring to the selflessness of persons. And then the next one is number 7, realization of suchness, the wisdom perceiving emptiness, and that refers to the selflessness of all phenomena. This is the emptiness of inherent existence, the true nature of all phenomena. Now this kind of thing, I mean, naturally we think, well, how do I know? How do I know if my teacher has these realizations? This is talking about something inside the mind, and they don't have any insignia on their body or something written on their forehead that they have this realization. It is hard to know. It is hard to know. I don't know the answer to that. But, yeah. Anyway. And then number 9, having love and compassion. So that's also very important, that the teacher's motivation is not personal gain, fame, anything like that, but they really care about others, about the students, and want to help them, want to lead them to enlightenment. Yeah. And generally they say you shouldn't rush into a teacher-disciple relationship. Like the first time you see a teacher, you immediately take them as your teacher. But instead, you should really take time, get to know the teacher. And in the past, there were cases of people spending 12 years getting to know a teacher before deciding, I'm going to take this person as a teacher. For example, you may have heard the story of Atisha. Lama Atisha was one of the great Indian masters who he didn't bring Buddhism into Tibet, but he was very instrumental in establishing Buddhism in Tibet. And one of his teachers, who he considered a really important teacher because it was through him that he developed bodhicitta, it was an Indonesian master, Lama Serlingpa, lived in Indonesia. So Atisha went to him, and he didn't immediately decide, I'm going to take this person as a teacher. Instead, he lived in the community for 12 years. 12 years. Watching the teacher, how is the teacher behaving in everyday life, and so on and so on. Finally, after 12 years, decided, okay, I'm going to take this person as a teacher. This person is qualified to be a teacher. So they say we should really be careful, because entering into a teacher-disciple relationship with someone is a really serious affair. It's much more serious than getting married, and most people wouldn't immediately rush into marrying somebody they don't know very well. So we really have to be careful, get to know them, not just when they're sitting on the throne, because some people have incredible charisma, and they're really eloquent and, very impressive in the teaching situation. But then if you see them elsewhere, outside, their behavior might be quite different. So we shouldn't just be taken in by appearance and charisma and eloquence and things like that, but really check to see how this teacher behaves in other situations. Try to really make sure they do have the right qualities. So some teachers say, well, 12 years might be a bit long, but at least 2 or 3 years. Spend at least 2 or 3 years getting to know a teacher before making this decision to, take that person as your teacher and take initiation from them and so on. So then there's also a list of qualities of a Vajrayana master. And there's 2 sets of 10 qualities. So I'm kind of in the middle of the page 2. And they're mentioned in the Guru Puja, verse 45. You are wise, patient, honest, without pretense or guile. Your 3 doors well subdued. You have both sets of 10 qualities, know Tantra and rituals, and are skilled in drawing and explaining. So drawing here doesn't mean, drawing, human faces or things, but drawing mandalas. So when initiations are given, then you have to have a mandala, and or fire puja. There's different kinds of rituals where a drawing needs to be made, so the teacher needs to know those. So we're not going to go through the details of these 10 qualities, but the 2 sets of 10 qualities mainly involve skill in performing tantric practices and rituals. And the 50 verses of Guru Devotion says that it is not enough for the Guru merely to perform the superficial actions of these rituals, but must actually be able to do them. Meaning, it's not just enough to draw a mandala, but you have to. The mandala is actually the universe, the environment of a deity. So in tantric practices, the deity is usually in the middle of a mandala, and the mandala usually consists of a celestial mansion, a kind of house, which sometimes is incredibly complicated. Goya Samaja, for example, there's all these details, and then different deities and different parts of the mandala and so on. So when you're doing that practice, you need to, create this visualization and then focus on it and develop good concentration with it. So the teacher, when drawing the mandala, needs to be able to actually make it into the real mandala of the deity. I think that's what it means here. Yeah, it says, for example, when consecrating an image of a meditational deity, he or she must be able to invoke the actual deity and place it in the image, and not merely recite the words of the text. The 50 verses also says that a tantric master must be an extremely stable person with body, speech, and mind totally under control. He or she should be someone in whose presence everyone feels calm, peaceful, and relaxed. Even the mere sight of him or her brings great pleasure to the mind, and his or her compassion must be unsurpassable. Okay. So again, it's important to take your time, get to know a teacher, try to see the teacher in different circumstances, although that's not always so easy, is it? Someone like the Dalai Lama, for example, there's a whole group of people around him, bodyguards and secretaries and so on. So to actually spend time around the Dalai Lama in other circumstances besides teaching isn't so easy. But on the other hand, reputation. The Dalai Lama, I think, for the most part, has a really stainless reputation. He's been active in the world for decades now and has won so much respect from so many people, and not to mention all the prizes he's been given and so forth. So I don't know. I just feel that kind of thing is useful, rather than somebody who nobody has ever heard of. Just out of the blue, they advertise on the internet. I'm going to give an initiation on this day, and so on and so forth. Everybody's welcome. Who is this person? Where did they receive their teachings from? And so on. Nobody's ever heard of them, so then it's a little suspicious. So anyway. And then the last point is the qualities of a disciple. So if we want to be a disciple of Tantra, we also need to have certain qualities. So it's a Tantric text called the Vajra Garland, explains the qualities a disciple should have. Faithful and full of respect for the Guru, abiding always in the practice of virtue, with wrong view completely abandoned. Such a one must have received many teachings. Free of the faults of killing and harming, with his or her mind intent on liberating beings, always diligent and very pure. These and others are the virtues he or she should have. The best of all is strong faith. So this gives us some idea of how we should be if we want to enter Tantra and engage in Tantric practice. Yeah, it said that faith is very, very, very important. Faith in our teacher, faith in Tantra, faith in the practices. There are stories, you may have heard, there's a number of these stories of a person who was reciting a mantra, for example, and they were actually reciting it wrong. They were saying the syllables incorrectly, but they had very, very strong faith, in the mantra. And even though they were saying it wrongly, it still had amazing effects. I'm just trying to remember the details of these stories. I think there was a woman, somebody's mother, the mother of a monk or something, and he taught her this mantra, but she got it wrong, and she was saying it wrong. But she had great faith in the mantra that she was saying. And there was a famine going on, like there wasn't enough food to eat. But with this mantra, she was able to take rocks, stones, and put them in a pot and cook them, and they would turn into food, like potatoes or something like that. So she was able to feed herself, even though, other people around were sort of starving. And it was due to the faith that she had in the mantra that she was reciting. And I think the monk, the son, came to visit her and was surprised to see that she was actually quite plump, even though everybody around was kind of skinny because there wasn't enough food. And so she explained to him what she'd been doing. She'd been cooking rocks and eating them. And she said, well, how did you do that? And she said, oh, because of this mantra I was reciting. So she recited the mantra, and he said, no, it's not like that. It's like this. You should say it like that. Oh, and then she started reciting it the right way, but she lost this ability to cook stones. Something like that. So then he said, okay, go back and do it the wrong way. So anyway, those kind of stories just show the power of faith, the importance of faith. That, of course we should try to do our practices correctly. It's not saying you can be careless and do them in any old way you want. So we should try to, do things in the right way. But if you had a choice between, having a perfect practice without faith and having an imperfect practice with faith, the practice with faith is more important. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's the point of those stories, having faith. But then, I don't know, I think for many of us, including myself, many of us in the West, this kind of thing is difficult. My observation of Tibetans and also other Asian people, for example, Chinese people. I lived in Singapore for many years, mostly working with Chinese people. They just seem to have, it's almost like in their genes, in their blood, in their bones, or whatever. It just comes so easily, so naturally for them to have faith. Faith in the Buddha, faith in the practices, faith in teachers and monks and nuns and so on. They're just so devoted that I think for us in the West, it's often more difficult to have that kind of faith. And I often wonder, well, if you don't have faith, what do you do? How do you get it? And there doesn't seem to be an answer to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, other things